Lesson 13 of client-side web development. And today we're going to go over and talk about taking control of your backgrounds and borders. We've already started working with, talked about backgrounds a little bit, and we're just going to go a little bit more in depth with backgrounds and borders and how to style, change the styles on your backgrounds and borders. So we're going to talk about how to layer your backgrounds, how to use gradients, how to use the CSS properties to create what are called zebra stripes, how to zebra stripe your tables automatically, how to create rounded corners on your elements, how to use images as borders, how outlines are different from borders. So quick review of backgrounds and some border basics. Use the background image rule in your CSS to set the image, uses your background. You also have the option of changing the position of your background, where the image should be placed on the element, written as the length, a percentage, or you can use the keyboard top, bottom, center, right, or left, and it'll position it appropriately. And then the other thing you can have is set the background size, which is the size of the image in the element, either as a width and height, or you can use the keywords cover or contain. So really quick, just to give you a quick demo, this, if you remember, here we are setting the background of our home page. And if we go ahead and look at our index here, what we had to do is we set the class of background here on the body. And then if we look at our style, let's move up to background. Here's the background class definition in our CSS rule. And then we just go ahead and hit background image. And then the image is this background.jpg, which is inside of our folder here. So that's how that background is getting displayed. All right, so let's go back to our lesson here. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. There's a background repeat, which allows you to tile your elements. Background origin, where the background image should start tiling. Clip, how the background should display beyond the elements container or the padding. Attachment, how the background should move relative to the viewport. And the background color is the color of the background using a color keyword, or you can use a color code. So in our example here, we'll go to background here. Here, the image was too small to fill the entire background. So what we did is we used the background repeat to say, hey, I want to repeat the image to fill the entire space. So, and that's what we did here. So if we go back to our CSS, let's go to background, HTML. Here we use the class cat background. So if we go back to our CSS here, sorry, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Get rid of this now. All right, so here we have the cat background, and we're using the cat background as the image, and then the extra rule is the background repeat, which we say, hey, repeat the background. And then that's what does the repeats that cat background that you see here. Okay, so the next slide, we're going to talk about the border property. It's just a shorthand property for setting your border width, style, and color. Border styles include solid, none, hidden, dash, dotted, double, groove, ridge, inset, and outset. And you can play around with those just to see what the different effects are. on your own. In our example here, oh, we haven't done that one yet. I think the next one, and then you can use multiple borders and backgrounds to create different styles. In the book, you can look at the example. I'm not going to go over the example here for that. There's also other forgotten background properties that you can use. They give you more control. But again, you can look those up in the book on your own. Choosing how to place the background, you can give like the border box, the padding box, content box, and the background origin. So there's a lot of controls where you can slightly tweak the background. We're definitely not going to go ahead and cover that. Well, I'm not going to give you a demo of those, but you can look up those on your own. And then you can also change the size of the background and the position. If you want, you can also scroll your backgrounds if you want. It's not something that's used a lot because it just looks weird, but you can scroll them. All right, and this is what I wanted to go and cover next was the alternating background colors, and this generally used on and tables so that you can have kind of like that zebra effect on your table. So you have alternating rows. And the way you do that is CSS has this nice nth child selector where you can select alternating rows. So the one that's used the most is the even and odd on the child selector. So that way you can style the even rows one color and the odd rows a different color. And that's kind of what we did here. So if I go to alternating background, you can see I styled, each row is styled with a different color. So the first one, this is row 1, so this would be the odd colors would be green, and then the even colors are this gray color. So the way we achieve this effect, so if I go to alternating here, so here's the table, and if you go over here to see how we style the table is styled like we normally do. We did a border collapse, the width, and then we did a header and the table data. We set that a certain style. Now this is what sets your background color on the for each of the rows. So we say for the TR, the odd rows we're going to get light green. All the even rows are going to get that light blue color. Oh, that's blue. Yeah, it's a blue color. So even though it looked kind of grayish, it's just really light blue that it almost looks gray. So, all right, and then that gives you this effect. Yeah, so I guess that's a light blue, not a gray there. Okay, so that's how to do alternating. And then there's some, again, we use those pseudo classes to get the effect that we want. Yeah, this last of type here, this is good. Like if you want the last row to be a totally different color, you can do last of type. So. You can create gradients without using images. There are two types of gradients that you can use, linear and radial. So let's look at the linear. Use the linear gradient property. Property takes multiple colors. You can add what direction you want the gradients to go. And you can get a really nice effect, which is the effect that I have here on my linear gradient. You could say here I'm going from a yellow color to a blue, and it does this nice little, the gradient gives you an eventual change of color from one to the other. So it kind of gives you that effect. So let's look at the code for this. How did we do that? So let's look at our linear gradient here. All right, so here's our linear gradient. Um, and really all we did is we were setting the background of the page. We give it a class of linear. And then if we go back here and look at our linear, all we're doing is setting the background image, but we're not actually setting it to a JPEG or an actual image file. We're actually setting it to a linear gradient. And we say from to the bottom, I want it going from yellow to blue. And then that creates our gradient for us. All right, so that's the linear gradient. And you can see linear gradients go from one direction to another. Radial gradients, they're similar to linear, but they take two more colors and they fade from one to the next. You can add the shape of the gradient by adding the shape to the beginning, and you can also adjust the size of your gradient. All right, so let's look at an example of how that looks like. Let's see, we'll go to radial. All right, so you can see it actually almost comes from the center out to the sides. And as you can see in our example here, for the radial gradient, again, on the body we set a class of radial, and then we define that radial gradient. Again, with the background image, we say radial gradient, and here we say, hey, I want the shape of the gradient to be a circle, and then you give it multiple colors that's going to use for that gradient. All right, let's go back here. Next thing we're going to look at is rounding the corners of an element, HTML element. This gives you a nice little effect so you don't have sharp corners. And you can use the property of border radius and then give it how many rems. The higher the rem, the more rounded the corner is. So let me go ahead and give you an example. Now, if you remember, these are the rounded corners that we had here. And before, when we in the previous exercise where we did these were like cards that we created, but we had sharp corners. But you can give it a nice style of adding these rounded corners here, which gives it a nice effect. So how did we do these rounded corners? Let's take a look at our rounded corners here. All right, so here are the card image. So this first card, we round the corners on. So let's look at our style for the card. Basically what we did is the card's the same as like we had before in our previous examples, but now we add this border radius of 2 rems, and that gives you that nice rounded corner there. All right. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at is adding the images to your borders. So you can actually give there's a border image source property that you can give your set an image to your border instead of having it just be a line like we usually do. And I think that's the example you saw down here where you have these nice little flowers that show up. So if we look over here, let's go back to the rounded, because the second one, this border card, is what gives us that bordered image. And then so if we look at the border card, what we did here is we gave it a border image of this flower frame. So I went ahead and found this flower frame PNG out there. And again, if you want to look at what the image looks like, it actually looks like the image is already a border, and we're just applying this onto the actual border. So if you do have an image, it has to be shaped like this, where it's kind of transparent all around, and then it already has some border, and then this image gets applied onto your div to create the border. So if we go back here, let's go back here. So that's the flower image. We also say the percentage and if you want it rounded out. And we also add this background clip so it looks properly. And that's pretty much it. That's all you have to do to get that effect if you want to do custom borders like you saw here. All right, so you define your border image width and whether you want it to repeat. Then the last thing we're going to cover is CSS outlines. Outlines and borders, they're kind of look similar, but they're a little different. The difference is outlines don't take up space, and outlines may be non-rectangular. Browsers and other user agents render outlines on elements when they are in a focus state. So if we look at our outline, down here I did an outline, and as you can see, I made the outline blue, but it really is right on top of the border because the border is actually black inside. So if you look over here to where I had my CSS, I did an outline card. Hold on, around the border here. Yeah. So my class for this last one is this outline card. So in my CSS, again, everything's pretty much the same. It has a border, a black border, but then the outline kind of gets drawn on top of the border, but doesn't take up space. So it'll bleed into, when you add an outline, it will bleed into the next element if you do that. So you have to be very careful of how wide you make it, or it's going to bleed into everything. Yeah, and I think a good demo of this is let's make this very large, 50 pixel outline. If I save this and I go back here, you notice now this outline is on the outside of the border, but it will bleed into the next element. Actually, I probably didn't make it big enough. So if you show you, say I make this 100, something totally crazy here, and we go here, yeah, now it really bleeds into, you can see it bleeds into this top part, which isn't really the effect we wanted, but this is just to kind of show that the outline kind of expands outward as far as you want it to expand. And that's the difference where border, if you add the border, it'll actually push everything out a bit. So I'm going to go back to our 3 pixel border, which is what I had before. Then we got here, and then we're good. Now we have a normal border here. Sorry, normal outline there. Okay, and I think that's it for today. Thank you. Until next time, I will see you later. Thanks. Bye.